Let's have a look at some 266 top ends. First off, piston. They use the same style of piston through the entirety of production. This is what you will find 1982 through 1997. This is directly swappable with a 268 or 670 piston, and that is an upgrade that a lot of these saws like. When we look at the cylinders, there isn't a change between the SE and the XP, because as I've said many times, the last SE and the first XP, the only difference between those saws is the stickers. But there were changes along the lines. And the early saws, this one, the newest I've seen it on has been a late 82, early 83 saw, this 50ZN11. So if you notice the fin shape is different, it actually matches a 162 or 630 cylinder, but it isn't drilled for the top cover screw. This guy has a fairly small intake port, and it has a smaller exhaust port, and this, if we timed it out, is in the high 90s timing wise, whereas typically the later 266s are all in the 102 to 105 range, thereabouts, when they're all stock. So if you look at that first one, this is a 50ZN13W2. So this is going to be 84-ish. If you look at it, that intake port has grown significantly, and I don't know if we'll be able to really see it here, but the exhaust port as well is quite a bit larger. And this is kind of the dimensions that they stayed with through production. You can see the transfers, they didn't change a whole lot. They're definitely a little bit bigger on the newer cylinder, but not a huge change there. And timing wise, they're very similar on the transfers. Just this early guy is taller in the exhaust, or it's higher up. Now we go to this. This is a W6. So this is, if I remember right, this came off of an 87 or an 88 saw. And when we compare it to the W2, the shape of the intake has changed a bit, but the overall dimensions are very similar. The transfer ports are very similar again, and the exhaust port, it really hasn't changed at all. Like, there's no real changes there. And this one here is the newest one I have loose. This is a W8. So this guy is off of, if I remember right, it came off of a 92. I do have a W9, but it's bolted to a chassis, and that one I think is a 95. But again, when we compare it, this one actually has a slightly smaller exhaust port than the W6, but transfers, you know, very, very similar. Same thing with the depth of the transfers. And the intake port, again, the shape has changed a little bit, but I don't think our port time area has changed much at all. Go back to comparing. We're going to go back to comparing to the W6, because this is an 87 268 jug. This is a W2. It came off of a 268 built week 50 of 1987. And as you can see, it has more intake. It has significantly larger transfers, and they're significantly deeper in the casting as well. If you even look on the flywheel side, it's actually relieved for flywheel clearance because it's that much deeper. There's a lot more volume in those transfer ports. The intake port, again, it's quite a bit larger. Looks like our overall timing is very similar though. But the big one on these is the exhaust port is a lot nicer. It interestingly has a step in the top of it. Let's kind of see it there, and I think they did that to bleed off timing. So if you stick this on a case with no base gasket in it, it's going to be around 100 first ray of light, but the actual opening, because it's got that step in it, is closer to 97. And I think that's to act a lot like a T-port did in a partner and bleed off some cranking compression, just to make it easier to pull over. where you see the 266 jug does not have that. So these perform quite a bit better. And the intake, there's quite a bit more area on the intake side of it too, not just on the inside where it meets the piston. But my favorite jug for this chassis, this guy here, this of course is the 670. And as you can see, it's got very similar large transfers to the 268. I mean, they're probably time out very similar, and it's got the large volume casting the same. But look at that intake port. That is not ported. That is the way they made that. That's the casting. It is nice and squared off. It is maximum area. And the exhaust port, again, it's nice and big. It does have a little bit of that step in it as well. This I'd expect with no gasket in it to time out probably to 100 first rail light. So with the gasket, probably like 102, 103. And these by far are the best performing cylinder on that chassis. And that is totally discounted to 272. 50 mil just works better on that chassis if you're doing anything other than bone stock. And if you're doing stock with the 52 mil, it better be an OEM cylinder or you're not gaining over these. The aftermarkets don't. But overall, between the SE and the XP, like I said, the last SE was exactly the same saw as the first XP. The only difference is the decals.